This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
If we think of the fourth as actually putting America fourth, whatever that means for you, what comes first, second, and third? What are our basic agreements? Do we agree on anything? What are we able to unify around?
The Village Square, a nervy bunch of liberals and conservatives who believe that disagreement and dialogue make for a good conversation, a good country, and a good time. At the Village Square, we talk about politics, religion, and race. You know, the topics your mom taught you never to discuss in polite company. Listen, at the Village Square, we make pigs fly.
Hey folks, welcome to Village Squarecast. This is Corey Nathan again. So glad to be with you. Thank you for joining us for America Fourth. I love it when we punctuate with the question mark because it makes me question my very existence. Anyway, America Fourth and other half-baked joyous schemes to unite a dangerously divided people. Funding for this program was provided through a grant from Florida Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Check out Florida Humanities online at floridahumanities.org. We're going to dive right into this absorbing, winsome, provocative conversation that Pastor Latricia Scriven of St. Paul's United Methodist Church moderates, with the participation of our wonderful God Squad members, Rabbi Paul Sidlowski of Temple Israel, Pastor Josh Hall of First Baptist, and Pastor Joseph Davis Jr. of Truth Gatherers Community Church. So, without any ado, Pastor Latricia will kick it off for us, and I will see you on the other side.
Thank you all. We're so excited that you are here, and I can't wait to see how our discussions go. They're always exciting for me. I'm Latricia Scriven. I get to serve as the senior pastor at St. Paul's United Methodist Church, where we worship, grow, serve, share, and give with joy.
I'm Paul Sidlowski. I'm the rabbi here at Temple Israel. Let me welcome you all here. We're very glad to have you.
Josh Hall, pastor at First Baptist Church of Tallahassee.
Joseph Davis, senior pastor, Truth Gatherers Church here in Tallahassee.
All right, so we are going to jump right in. I really enjoyed that it was called America Fourth, and we're going to get into some of that. But first, I have a question, and it's because Hirsch, who is actually the author of Politics is for Power and Hacking the Electorate, you may have read, said that we have become insufferable political hobbyists, insufferable political hobbyists who need to get a life. And so I thought that was great. And I first want to know, what do you think about that? Are we actually insufferable political hobbyists who need to get a life?
Wow.
Come on.
Raised it.
All right, well, what I take out of that is, I can't disagree. What I take out of that is that a lot of us have just become obsessed with politics in the wrong ways. I think it's great that people are interested in politics in terms of caring about their country, but we've become so political and so divided, and that is really the issue. I don't have an issue with politics per se. To me, politics should ideally be the art of compromise, and it has become the opposite. It has become a way to divide us, and we have knee-jerk reactions to almost anything and everything, and we resent and even hate other people simply because of whom they support, and we don't listen to the reasons why they do that.
I think one of the ways you see it is, instead of, because I'm with Paul, like we want to, this is what we do here, this Village Square, is encouraging civic engagement. Well, you got to care. But I think it's more when it becomes like politics as sport, where it's a spectator sport, and you're just watching to see if the person on your team scored more points than the person on the other team, and whether it was in a debate or whether it was some interview or whatever. Did your team have the gotcha moment that doesn't actually change anything? it was just in that moment you feel like, you scored points. That would, to me, be the insufferable political hobbyist kind of mentality, versus saying, no, I do care that there's substantive conversation. I do care that we're trying to pursue compromise and agreement. I do care that we're trying to reach noble ends. Oh, that takes people being engaged for that to happen. So we don't want to discourage engagement, but are we engaged, or are we just, enjoying watching the political train wreck?
That word hobbyist really rings a bell for me, because truth of the matter is all of us are challenged with time and even the way politics and business of government and leadership is delivered to us, that the most average person doesn't have time to really do the research and the fact finding. And so many times we're really just following behind a sound bite, a clipping, media divisiveness, that I think we really are hobbyists. And we're taking the snapshots, and maybe some years way before the time we live in now, we really could value real journalism, and we were getting good content. And now we really are just hobbyists, and if we're not careful, we are also puppets, because the sound bites come, it triggers us to the things we care about, but if we did a little more research sometimes, the spin on it may not really be accuracy. So I think with journalism and some of the changes we really face, we are hobbyists. And I've slowed down some of my speech on politics because I just recognize I don't have enough time to follow them and keep up. And so my information may not be factual. And I have to always think that way, even when I'm talking, that I have really become a fact-finding junkie. So that when I talk, I can back it up with some level of accuracy. And I don't know, I really feel bad many times that as passionate as I am, I have to pause because my data may be wrong. Yeah. And that bothers me.
Okay, so here's the thing about hobbies. As many of you point out, people don't have a chance to be an expert at it, but it's something you engage in because either you enjoy it, it's a spectator sport, or you participate in it and it gives you a sense of belongingness, joy, or something. One of the definitions of politics that comes to mind, I remember a very basic grad school definition: who gets what, when, and how. Who gets what, when, and how as a definition of politics. Do you think that we actually believe that being a hobbyist helps to determine who gets what, when, and how? I mean, do I really need all of the facts? There are people for that. Can I just jump in to the conversation? And if enough of us jump in, we really can determine who gets what, when, and how. What do you think?
I think the good part about looking at it as a hobby, and if we really are a democracy, is that everyone has a voice. Everyone potentially can contribute. And so you don't have to be an expert to express your view. However, you should acknowledge, if you're not an expert and you're just starting out as a hobby, that you cannot dictate to everyone what is right just because you heard someone say it or because you believe it or it suits your point of view. The whole idea of being in a democracy is everyone has a voice, and we come together and, as I said before, compromise to reach a conclusion. We may not be 100% happy with the decision and the outcome, but we all hopefully get something that we need or we want, and that helps move us all forward together. So I think that's a very important thing. If we look at it as we have all the answers, then it's not going to work.
Can I just Google all the answers and then I have them?
Again, you can have a hobby and say, I now become an expert. There are cartoons that have been around, they say, last week I was an expert on Middle Eastern affairs, and this week I'm an expert on border policy. And, everyone changes their area of expertise day by day, week by week. We're not experts, but we do have a voice. So it's finding a balance and listening to the others as well, not just expressing our own views.
I think some of it in terms of we're freedom of speech and everything else. We're encouraged, even the young people, to have an opinion. But man, I much more value an informed opinion. And those seem to be in shorter supply, especially in the age of social media where it's easier, you have more access to express your opinion to more folks without the built-in filter of, well, why should I trust what this person said? And as their, whatever they posted gets elevated or magnified. And also in our current society and structure, hot takes are more valuable than cold takes. I mean, this was part of what Joe was saying a moment ago, is taking a moment to pause and go, well, actually, let me go look into Middle Eastern something before I post about this. Well, if I wait and 3 days later, even after all the Googling, that's not what everybody's talking about. Now they've moved on to something else. And so you're always lagging. Well, then you don't feel engaged. So, we get that dopamine hit from being engaged in the conversation and whatever. And I don't know that that's reinforcing a healthy dialogue and conversation. But it's what we're shaping. It's what, we're that way because everybody wants to hear a hot take. They don't want to go back to what we were talking about a week ago. They want to talk about what's current. So I don't think that necessarily helps with what you're talking about here, or at least helps move us in a positive direction.
I've been really thinking here, and our first...
Just like you said you do.
Yeah,
living it out.
Yeah, I'm living it out. I'm thinking a whole lot lately. My thoughts right now is I'm watching the removal of experts all over our government, and it's bothering me. Because on one side, we have passionate people who are passionate about philosophy, theories, or what they believe, but we gotta have the experts at the table. And I'm concerned about the loud hobbyists versus the deliberate, thoughtful expert who is not being heard, who is resigning from boards and positions. And so I'm bothered more than anything today. I know many times in these forums, we look for civility, and we're gonna have that. But I'm bothered, and I think that's part of my honesty today. I'm bothered by that lack of due process, that lack of having experts at the table and valuing that as we make change, and as changes that need to occur. I will also say, since I'm talking, that my points of view are neither solely Democratic or solely Republican, right? Since we're being torn apart to be either or one, I'll just say mine are neither solely Democrat or solely Republican, but I think from a humanity point of view, we really need expert advice right now.
Side note, I wore purple today because I have this dress in multicolors. I chose not to wear red or blue, but purple because this is the God Squad in Village Square. All right, back to the point. So I wonder, because you make an interesting point about experts being removed or are leaving spaces. Could it be that we are redefining what it means to be an expert? That there are some who would say that at one point, expert was the person who did all the research and gathered the data and the information. And now we're realizing expert is the person who is actually doing the thing that we want done. So my question is, are we redefining what it means to be an expert?
I'll let them talk redefining, but what I was thinking of when Joe was speaking, and ties in with what you're saying, is what we have seen is an erosion of trust in institutions. And I think that's related to our view of experts, because now it's, well, I don't trust the experts. I mean, let's just be honest, COVID did not help the trust in experts. On either side, whatever side you were arguing, debating, that did not help. That expedited what was already an erosion of trust in institutions, and I think it just exponentially, sent it off the cliff. And then what fills that void is, well, whoever's saying something that I like, or whoever reinforces my conspiracy theory, or whoever, whatever. And so that now replaces, for a lot of folks, what decades ago would have been, well, let's trust what the experts say, what the institutions, what the scientists, what the whoever says. And now, so even whether we're redefining it or not, I don't know that they even care. I mean, even to say expert, for a lot of folks today, smacks of elite, which means, well, now I'm going to automatically reject what you're saying because you're just part of that elite because you went to school for that.
How dare we go to school for things?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what was just said. I also would add the aspect of apathy, because in addition to not trusting, and that's a big part of it, there's a lot of not caring. And if we look at statistics purely, and not to get particularly political about this, but if we look at current situation, if you look at who voted this way, who voted this way, there's maybe a third voted this way, which it certainly doesn't represent most Americans. A third voted this way, give or take a couple million, and a third didn't really care or didn't vote, and really doesn't know. And of the third that did vote this way or that way, a lot of them don't really know why they voted that way other than a gut feeling. And so I think that's a big problem. I think this is a reflection of the electorate in general. It's not, we can't just blame the leadership. We have to blame the people in a democracy who brought them into power, whatever, whoever is in government at the time. And we have to say, look, we're responsible. We have a voice. We need to use it. We need to use it in an informed way. And so the not trusting is a huge part. The not caring is another huge part.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up the lack of apathy, or apathy and the lack of compassion, rather. And I think that's important, even when we're listening and trying to care about what's happening. So I really appreciate that.
Okay, so apathy, lack of compassion, distrust in experts, and people individually, as you name, being torn apart themselves, right? On one hand, I think this. On the other hand, I think this. And my being is being torn apart, let alone that of our society. Some would say that we're putting a lot of energy into this, and it is unhealthy. Our conversation around the politics is unhealthy, and yet we can't help but keep being involved and being even more unhealthy. So here is the question. Should we put America fourth? And someone asked me, was this a mistake? Was it meant to say first? I said, no, they meant fourth. We meant fourth. So should we put America fourth? Everybody goes, what are they going to say?
Oh, there you go. No. We're angels fear to tread. No, it's okay. I think with anything, it depends what you mean by that. So I do think, I affirm the principle that says proximity increases responsibility. Or we sometimes talk about subsidiarity. So that idea that I should be more concerned about my responsibility for my family and not neglect them at the expense of some issue or concern on the other side of the country or whatever that I have no direct influence over. So I'm not saying that we don't care, but I'm saying is if I expend all my energy looking at Twitter on that or X or whatever, or diving into that, and I'm neglecting things that I can actually influence, starting in my home, in my neighborhood, in my community, if I'm neglecting that in order to spend all my energy over here where my influence is negligible relative to the influence that I'm able to have here, then there's a sense in which I do think it is healthy to have some sort of priority, take responsibility, and be most engaged where you can most make a difference. At the same time, I would never want to encourage when we say America fourth, what do we mean by America? Because if I mean my fellow Americans, then I should care. And I don't want to reach the point that I'm like, well, I don't care, there's somebody else's problem. I just care about me and mine. So I do think you do have to have, some sort of prioritization there, but I don't think that should be license for neglect or for apathy like we were talking about earlier. So we just have to be careful about what we mean when we say those things. And slogans usually aren't great for nuance.
That is so true.
I'll quote Rabbi from 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Hillel, who said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And yet if I'm only for myself, what am I?" And to me, that speaks to this question. So the answer is yes and kind of no, but the no is a bit of a yes, which is yes, we put America first. We're Americans, but if anything, we put humanity first. But the other thing, as you were getting at, is what does it mean to be American? When we put America first, does that mean we call half of America patriots and the other half the opposite of patriots and traitors, and accuse them of treason and things like that because they don't happen to agree with the leader that we support or the policies that we support? Or do we say we are all Americans, and when we say put America first, we mean put all of us first, and the only way to do that is to work together. And again, I keep coming back to the word compromise and finding ways to work together on issues. That's the only way it works. So I think it's very important. Yes, we need to be for ourselves. We need to put America first, but I think we've lost what that means to truly put America first. We are putting our own take on what it means to be American first, and that's harmful.
So what about fourth?
Well, I can't think of two others to put before it.
We'll come into that question. Yeah. Don't answer it. That's going to be a question. All right, go.
Yeah, I struggle again with America fourth. I think America needs to be redefined. Our priorities, our values. Somebody needs to establish what is a real America values again. So I struggle with America fourth. We know the fourth comes from the aspect of liberty and justice for all, is where that fourth comes from, the connotation. Also, it represents independence. It's the play on July 4th. And so it's a play of words, but it's back to a definition of what it is to be American and what America stands for. America has had a long history of democracy and diplomacy. And where do we draw the line? How much money do we send to other countries? When are we really neglecting our values? And I think we're in a redefining moment. And I think pushback is important right now, so that we can potentially find middle ground. So those are my thoughts.
So America fourth as a play on words, the fourth independence, as you say, or even in an array of what are we putting first, second, and third if we say fourth, or if we are thinking about it in terms of, well, we've got to redefine what America is in the first place and what we mean. And I find it a fascinating question, especially given where we are right now when we think of America in terms of wars that are happening, in terms of a potential trade war, in terms of many things that are going on right now. So Dr. Danielle Allen says that we've got to start with some basic agreements before we can have a foundation. If we think of the fourth as actually putting America fourth, whatever that means for you, what comes first, second, and third? What are our basic agreements? Do we agree on anything? What are we able to unify around? Give me three. That's easy, right?
I think we agree on a lot more than we realize we agree on. It's just that we, again, have knee-jerk reactions to catchphrases or terms, slogans. So I think we all agree on security. What does that mean? We all want to live secure lives. I think we all agree on having peace. I think we agree on, having prosperity and allowing people. The problems occur when we either narrowly define what those things mean or narrowly limit it to certain people, right? So yes, we should have equal rights, but does that mean that, still to this day, there's a gap between men and women. There's a gap between blacks and whites. There's a gap between LGBTQ plus community and others. There's a gap, and do those groups have less rights as Americans? Of course not, but a lot of people see that way. As a Jew, I'm struggling with that as well. A lot of people, there's a real discrepancy. A lot of people think Jews have made it and they are very privileged. On the other hand, there's increasing anti-Semitism in the country tremendously. We have to have security here, as opposed to other places of worship around that don't, and only because it's a Jewish congregation. So there are a lot of limits as to how people see what these things apply to. But I think we can agree on those basic principles. It's a matter of how do we apply them, and do we apply them fairly and equally.
So you think we can agree on, what did you say again? Security?
Security, well, I'm throwing out some. I think, the other one I didn't mention is life, the value of life. Mm-hmm. I think, not to open a big can of worms, huge can of worms, but if we look at the abortion issue, there's a big divide between the so-called pro-life and the so-called pro-choice. I think everyone is pro-life in a general sense, meaning everyone cares about the health and value of human life. But do we define that as the fetus? Do we define it as the mother? Do we define, what are the different areas? If we just saw that we all care and don't demonize the other side in the debate, then we might get a lot further.
Were you jumping in?
I'm not even sure if I'm jumping in.
I wouldn't.
Like I said, I'm in thought, and I've been practicing more honesty. And what I mean by that, and I'll go into my point, is not shielding myself from the real feelings that I'm feeling. And I think America needs to care. I grew up in South Florida, and growing up among Hispanics, Puerto Ricans, diversity, those were my friends. Those were my family, So for me, getting back to humanity and caring for people, we had this big issue of health care. They say America is rich enough to offer health care to everyone. Other countries scoff and laugh at America, how we struggle with some basic things they take care of, So I think America needs to get back to caring. And I think it's not just about those high ideals, security, protection. It's really about the administration of those ideals. How do we carry protection out? How do we carry security out? So it's about the carefulness of carrying out of those things. So in those carrying out is when we get into the challenges. That's where we need the experts, the people to say, hey, on this part, we need to slow down a little bit. There's some people here, doing some good work. And do we just uproot family structures? And now what do we do now when we uproot family structures and while we call ourselves carrying out security? So I think it's really about the carrying out of these ideals, not just these high, lofty ideals. It's how do we carry those things out? Do we do it with the sense of morality, whatever that is, and ethics, in a way that we can be respected while we bring a sense of order? So that's how I would kind of address that.
It's interesting because I struggle with what can we actually agree on, like for real, and rally around. So then my question is, as was noted, 70% of op-eds say that, kind of end with this call for unity, but we can't really decide what we're going to be unified around. Is unity, in however you define that, is that actually possible? Or is it a lofty goal that's so out there that maybe we work toward it, kind of like perfection, but never reach it? Or is it something that can be attained? Like, can we be unified? And I'm asking, as we each sit up here representing different faith traditions with different belief systems and structures among us, can we actually be unified? And if so, around what?
The answer is no, unless we're really ready to confront our biases. So we can talk about the concept of unity. Unity always sounds good on paper. We sound like heroes when we talk about unity, but until we're ready to confront our biases, we can't have unity. Simple example, our church has been going through a little bit of church growth. And we've been excited a little bit about church growth. More people coming, opportunity to impact more lives. Wonderful. But when you find out that you have a favorite seat in the church, when you find out you have a favorite park in the parking lot, when you find out that even you have a seat for your purse, and you really don't want to move your purse for a person, because your purse must have a place in worship.
You've done gone to Medlin.
Yes.
So although we want to talk about reaching more people and being unified, which was the goal, when we start reaching that goal, now we had to confront biases and things that hinder us from unity. So can we reach unity? Yes, but are we ready to really healthily confront biases? The answer is no.
I certainly understand that. I certainly understand about the seats and stuff. But I would like, without being naive, to say yes. But I also have to say something very skeptical about this. And this is part of me. I'm Canadian originally, and now I'm an American citizen. So I keep an eye on what's going on in Canada. If you're aware, there's an election later this month in Canada. This was a very divided country, like us, right? They have the liberals, they have the conservatives. I'm telling you right now, they are united. And they are united, why? Because it's anti-US. They are united, and that is going to be the one determining factor in the election later this month. It has turned it around on its head. And my point is, I sometimes think the only way we are going to get together as people on this planet is to be attacked by aliens, because the only time we're going to stand up together as humanity is to say it's us against them. And this is, before that happens, hope that doesn't happen, not only to be attacked, but that we have, we don't get to that, a more positive point earlier. The only way to prevent that, to get to that point, is that we need to stop looking for an enemy. We need to stop having someone to be opposed to, right? And that's not the only thing that should unite us. We need to unite because of our common goals as a country, right? So I've heard people say, I don't like this president, for example, but I support this president because I want the country to succeed, right? And I've heard that from people on both sides of the political aisle. And that's a good way of looking at it. It's not just respecting the presidency, it's hoping for the success of the president, because that affects all of us, right? We're all in the same boat. And so we can, I agree with Joe, it's going to be very hard, unless that's the key word. We can, if we stop looking for an enemy and start looking for ways to connect us, and realize that what affects us affects everyone else.
I think I share the same skepticism, because I was thinking the same thing. Like, if you look back just in U.S. history, when, countrywide have you seen the most unity? and it's always when we're at war. And it's because nothing helps you to have unity. You have to be willing to, something greater overcomes your differences. Those differences don't go away. We still saw them in World War II. We still saw them all the way back, the colonists, but there were still the differences. But we said, okay, we're willing to overlook those differences because we have this shared goal eclipses my feelings about these differences. And when we don't have that, then we start looking at each other and going, well, I never liked that about them. And so, now, because I don't have anything greater. So unity, I'm probably more skeptical about, but I do think we can still have cooperation. And I do think we can still say, you know what? And again, to Paul's point about politics, when it's working in a more functional way, at the Capitol, they would, might not agree, but they could cooperate. I haven't changed my values. I don't even completely agree with you, but I am willing to, in order to make this thing happen, I'm willing to set this part aside. I don't know that we would define that. You might try to define that loosely as unity, but to me, maybe it's more precise to say we could cooperate, we could work together. Doesn't mean that I am denying my values or where I continue to disagree, but on this issue, we can find a place for common ground to work together.
Okay, so this is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that if we actually want unity, we've got to be willing to confront our own biases and ourselves and our thoughts. I'm hearing that unity often does not happen except when there's a situation of crisis, especially war. And I'm hearing that at least if we can't be unified, we should cooperate. And if not, perhaps it will do us some good for the aliens to come and attack us so that we can be better people. Did I get that?
That's right.
All right. All right. Okay. So I have a question before we then turn to the questions. Fill in the blank with a word or a phrase. Let's make America.
Let's make America a stiff drink.
That's it. I think that's it. I think that's it.
Then we won't even know that we're not unified.
Yeah, there you go. That's how we do it.
No other fill in the blanks. That's it. That's a wrap.
I don't think we're going to top that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, with that stiff drink for America, we're going to turn it over to you for questions. Give them a hand, and they do great.
Good job.
And I love when I get to ask questions because I don't have to answer anything. All right. I see a question there.
So we are tethered here, so I'll do my best to come to you.
Okay, thanks. What do you think the influence of technology is on our perception of America and each other?
I think it can be good and it can be bad. It's kind of like water can bring life or it can drown you, And so I think in the same way that you have an opportunity through technology to, especially like I just think social media, to find through the internet, to find folks that you're like, oh, I agree with them, or they, to find that common cause. And at the same time, you can find other stuff as well that would also incite more division. So it's just, again, kind of buyer beware. I think this is where we have to have that with anything that we use it responsibly. And as we use it irresponsibly, then things don't tend to go as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. It could be good or bad. And I think of like the 19th century when people thought that humanity was moving on this upward, trajectory with the creation of all these different things, including technology, and we thought we were moving towards perfection as human race. And then the 20th century came along, and we had 2 world wars and a Holocaust and a whole bunch of other things. And then we've had the 21st century, I don't have to say. We've had all sorts of craziness. So we've shown that technology does not advance people. When I do Torah study or biblical study with adults, I often love to point out, and we discuss how we have advanced, in quotation marks, in terms of science and technology, and we're living in a very different world, but people are people, and we study the characters in the Bible, and we learn from them because they are no different than we were in many ways. So have we advanced because of technology? Yes and no. Is it good? Yes and no. We have to learn how to harness it, and that goes back to the religious theological concept of free will. We can choose how we're going to act, and that includes use of technology.
We got a line for me.
Rabbi, I think your call for aliens to attack, we've seen that. I mean, the aliens are attacking, right? Refocus, change paradigm at the, quote, southwest border. This has been used. Of course, just to disavow that, just for personally, I don't believe that. But within your respective congregations, to what extent, recognizing the free exercise clause, the establishment clause of the Constitution, but to the extent in your individual congregations, to what extent do you take on this disparity or divisiveness or disaggregation per se?
Go for it. You don't get to answer much.
You've been asking questions.
So it's interesting. I actually, and we have a couple people from St. Paul's, our congregation is, I would say, purple congregation. And we have, over these past couple of years, with the broader backdrop of the United Methodist Church and disaffiliations and all of that, intentionally focused on joy as a theme. And I think that focus helps us in spaces where there may be disagreement to be able to still have conversations, turn to wonder, ask questions, and there is such a deep value around their own relationships and hanging out and doing ministry together that, at least as far as I've seen, it has not become a disunifying theme in the congregation, because there is such a unification around faith and family and joy and how do we find fun and embrace widely.
Since you asked about within our congregations, I'll say then, as a Baptist pastor of a church, what we talk about is that we should be united in Christ, and what divides us outside should not divide us within our congregation, within our church family. So how you vote, different issues like that would be very divisive in society should not divide us here. If, going back to what we said earlier, if I'm united in something greater than these differences. So that is something that we do focus on.
We're trying to navigate not alienating members of our congregation because of political views. I've heard from people on both sides of the aisle who have come to me one-on-one to express concerns, including you should speak more about this, or things like that. But we are trying to focus on values rather than on political issues, and have everyone have a chance. So for example, if I'm asked to talk about a particular topic, and we're addressing this as we speak, rather than my talking about it from the pulpit, I'm saying let's have a discussion group on it, where I might give a little introduction with some background material, maybe a handout with some important things. So for us, as a Jewish congregation, what does Judaism have to say about these values objectively, and how can we use that as a springboard to inform our discussion? As we say, it's got a vote, not a veto, right? It's not the only thing you have to take into account, but it's an important aspect as Jews to have Jewish perspective, same for Christians, for any religion, to take the perspective of your religion and put it in the mix when making a decision.
And I would even add that we don't escape saying certain things from the pulpit, and finding the common grounding, right, in my context, in Christ. And so what are we to say about this that is happening? Because sometimes the thought is, let's just ignore it all and just not deal with it. But we're here to deal with it, because if the gospel is good news, then what is the good news for now?
Yes. Thank you. Wanted to get back to the unity question. And I think my question to you all is, are you missing out on what can unify us? You all are here together. We're together. This ought to happen more often. What about spirituality as a unifying force for our country? Not necessarily the same religion, but there are people young people are moving away from organized religion a lot. What about where spirituality fits in? Can the care for humankind, as you mentioned, can that be a unifying force for our country? I think we were founded on some of that. So how can we do more of what you're doing right here?
I think we have to be careful not to exclude those who do not identify with religion, but that you use the term spirituality. So I think that a lot of people, again, have the same values as people who might call themselves religious, but they wouldn't identify it as God or those types of things. So I think we need to look for common ground, not only among ourselves, as we do here in God Squad and Village Square, but in the whole country, among different faiths and among those who have no faith, because that's a big part of our country. So I agree, that's important that we could look for ways to unify through that. And yes, I agree, the more of this, the better that we do.
I agree as well. I think we do need to find other opportunities for unity, because if we can't unify on specific fronts that we personally care about, it's about finding out other things we have in common and using those as catalysts for unity. And I agree with you. I thank you. I had the same sentiment sitting here today, because I was first drawn in by compassion when I came into this building, because I had to be let in. I go to our church every Sunday and no one lets anyone in. You walk in the doors. So I immediately was hit with compassion walking in here immediately. And as I sat down, I was immediately sensitive to the virtue of God Squad. And so I want to give a shout out for God Squad. Could we put our hands together in applauding the mission of God Squad?
Good job.
Just a quick question. I had the privilege of serving in the Air Force and overseas throughout much of the 80s. And I had the chance to work with NATO partners when we were faced with Soviets and negotiating tactical nuclear force agreements with them. And there were some real agreements there. And I listened to President Reagan when he took our results and met with Gorbachev across the table. And what he said at the very end of it, he said, "We trust you, but we will verify." Fast forward 38 years, and I saw President Zelensky sit there in the White House, and I listened to the whole C-SPAN tape of it, and I said, I don't want bites, I want the whole tape. I listened to it twice, and I thought, what he said that caused the dust-up was security agreements. And I thought, he's really speaking about deep, deep fear. We faced that 38 years ago across the table, and we stood firm on the idea that we need to respect each other, but we need to be careful about this. It settles the fears. So I thought, we must be missing something, because he was expressing fear and he was thrown out of the White House. And I thought, we lost a great opportunity to deal with his fear, because fear is the thing that drives, bad outcomes. And I thought, what could we do differently as citizens? Because I heard it 38 years ago and we were successful. But we seem to be taking fear in the wrong direction, extolling it. wow, what's going on? What could we do as citizens? Because it frustrated me because I saw what we did positively. And 38 years later, we didn't do it. We let fear take the charge. I'm just confused. What could I do differently? What could we do differently? Because at the upper levels of government, it's not happening. I'm feeling frustrated.
What comes to mind, and this is kind of lofty, is the scripture that says, perfect love casts out fear. And I don't know that we want to put love first, because love takes risks. Love, puts me and myself not necessarily first, but considers everyone. Love is patient and kind, all of these other things that we say about love, but love takes risks. But when we can come to the table with curiosity and thinking about the other and thinking about what is it that's really driving the fear in this person, can I find a way to relate? Do I even want to? And begin to look through a different kind of prism. I think that it helps overall. It doesn't mean that fear in general goes away, but it does mean that we have a greater power available to us to help conquer fear, that is love, when we do it together. And so even when we talk about technology and how we engaged, what if we all intentionally engaged more with compassion and love as a beginning and starting point, rather than thinking about who's out to get me and why should I be afraid as our first thing? So I would say love. I like love. I love love.
I would say it's important to not necessarily see fear as a weakness. I think that's one of the issues in the direction we seem to be taking as a society, that we are not here to exploit those who are weakened. We are here to help. And I think that is part of what you were addressing that happened almost 4 decades ago. We have a responsibility in this country as a world power and a world leader to use that, going back to saying it could be for good or for not, or for evil. We have a responsibility to use that power, not to take advantage of and criticize and make people feel fearful of us or bully them into things, but to use that power for helping. And the other part of that is listening to the person who's feeling fear and saying, why? Why are you afraid? What can I do to help? And dispel that fear. And if we do that, then we could go a long way. The bravest people, as we know, are not the ones who don't feel fear. They're the ones who feel fear and overcome it. If you don't feel fear, you're not being brave by doing something.
That's right.
So we have a role as the one who has the most power and influence, potentially, to not abuse that power and not misuse that power.
And I would love for us to acknowledge the truth, too, that some people are intentionally inflicting fear, because that is a way that we keep power and control over others. So it's not just simply happening. For some people, it is an intentional act to keep others in fear, because it leads to being debilitated and all kinds of other things. And so, yes, how can we then help to overcome?
I think we've got time for one more question over here.
All your talk about the aliens being the only way to unite has got me thinking. And since you're the God Squad, and since you're all clergy, my question would be, assume for the moment that all of this humanity, where we are right now, is humanity 1.0, and that we were all a beta test. And if God came to you and said, I'm going to change one thing around for only one thing for humanity 2.0, what would you ask God for that change to be?
Oh, goodness. That's the most open-ended question ever.
That is an amazing question, and I will take a step back and say that question has sort of, in one way or another, been addressed by the rabbis in tradition, as so much was, by saying that God actually created and destroyed many worlds before arriving at this one. So then the question obviously is, what? That's the question. The question is, let me expand on the what. Why this world? Like all the other worlds, this is the best one. This is the best of all possible worlds. And one of the answers that I really like was, why is this the best? Because we have free will. Mm-hmm. This was the one where we were created with free will. And that's the best possible world. So part of me would say, and this will sound like a ridiculous answer, is I wouldn't change things because we have to have free will to make things meaningful. What would change is hopefully our ability to use that free will more constructively. But what would we change? Force everybody to love each other? Or make everyone the same so there isn't all this division? Make no religion or one skin color or one gender or one this? That isn't the way it should be. So I think it's a blessing that we have all this diversity. I think we have to learn how to handle it better. Not handle it, but how to celebrate it rather than oppose it.
Well said.
That's the answer.
But you're going to come with something funny like free pizza or something.
If God asked me, before I gave her an answer, I would ask for the divine discernment that only comes from something greater than me to give the best right answer. And then I'd answer. Because then I'd have it. That's all I got for you.
Good stuff.
I followed the rabbi's thought because if God gave us another chance, we'll still be at the same place we are in now. That was my thought. We'll be at the same place we are now. If he gave us another chance, we'll still be at the same place we are right now. I believe, and when I'm going to say this, I think you'll hear me. I think God has done enough. I think it's our turn.
I agree. And also, I want God to keep doing stuff.
Well, that about wraps it up. We've reached our 1 o'clock on that note. Thank you to our God Squad. Thank you to the rabbi and to Israel.
Hey, Corey, Nathan back here with you. As always, I really enjoy listening to the God Squad. I love the subjects. It gets me thinking before we even get started, and this one just did not disappoint. There were so many questions that were explored, and to hear the different points of view was really edifying for me. Are we indeed insufferable political hobbyists? I like to think not, but I'm sure some people that know me think that I am. Are we defining what it means to be an expert? I want to go back and read Tom Nichols' book. He re-released it last year, The Death of Expertise. And he certainly has an answer to that question. Another question was, should we put America fourth? And I love the challenge of starting to order our priorities, or whether we should even think of it that way, like there is a vertical order, or maybe our priorities are more like a diorama. And again, just each of our members of the God Squad had something different to offer. It's just really wonderful to start to really think more deeply about a question like that. But the question that really captured my imagination, and I'm going to continue thinking about, is, can we be unified? And I'm sure if you ask me tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, I'll have a different answer about that. But this is what I'm thinking of it right now. And the bad news is, can we be unified? The bad news is no. But that's specific to thinking generally. Like a lot of folks that I speak to that are frustrated, it's that there's this ideal of unity, of everyone coming to the same conclusions and agreeing on the same important things, and these things are important, and this way to achieve these things, that is unity. So when I think of unity in that sense, the general, the answer is no. Even when I think of the individual, when I think of any individual human being, the answer is still no, because I'm a human being, my friend is a human being, my wife is a human being, my kids are human beings, my neighbor is a human being. So inevitably, can there be complete unity? The answer is no. But in the specific, the answer is yes. In the specific, in the degrees, the answer can be yes. Meaning, when I have a conversation with someone, if I have a different point of view on a specific subject that we're talking about than they have, I've let go of the notion that I can have one conversation with that person and have inspire them to take a 180-degree turn on any given issue, whether it's or even how they're voting on a particular politician. Like I just don't see that happening. I'm not saying it doesn't, but in the hundreds, if not thousands of conversations I've had on important issues, it just doesn't happen that way. But what I have seen is if one approaches these conversations with the kind of disposition, with the kind of posture that Monty Guzman often talks about, leading with curiosity instead of contentiousness, I've seen almost every conversation open folks up to changes by degrees, not 180 degrees, but by 1 degree. So if I lead with curiosity and I'm also persuadable, then the person I'm speaking with is also persuadable. It makes them, in a sort of Jedi mind trick kind of a way, more persuadable because I'm more open to the possibility that I might be wrong. I'm more open to the possibility that I'll arrive at a point in our conversation where I say, like Monty Guzman in her book, oh, I never thought of it that way, which makes them more persuadable as well. But not, again, taking a complete turn and changing their minds completely, whatever that looks like, but by opening their minds by a degree, or maybe even changing their minds by a degree. And in that regard, we can have a conversation and nurture a relationship where there is unity by degrees. So that's maybe not a yes or no answer, but that's the answer that I'm brewing on. And like I said, if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably think very differently of it. But that's what I'm thinking of it right now. And that's why I love these God Squad conversations. And with that, it's time to close out today. Please consider joining our members and supporting this program. You can become a member for $7 a month or $76 a year, and your business can join for $250. Go to villagesquare.us/donate to join today. Again, that's villagesquare.us/donate. And while you're there, sign up for the Village Square's newsletter. You get the pop-up box when you log on to the website, and you can also scroll down to the bottom of the page, and there's a sign-up box for the newsletter. You get to see everything that's happening at the Village Square. Funding for this podcast was provided through a grant from Florida Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of Florida Humanities or the National Endowment for the Humanities. We appreciate you listening to America Fourth and other half-baked joyous schemes to unite a dangerously divided people. Until next time, we challenge you to reach out with an open heart and mind to someone who doesn't look or think like you. It changes everything. We'll talk to you soon, and thanks so much for listening to Village Squarecast.